The Ukrainian Air Force attacked the positions of the occupation artillerymen. Reportedly, a MiG-29 struck with GBU-39. Today is military update with Roman Svitan. Subscribe to YouTube 24 and to my YouTube channel. Subscribe, also likes are appreciated. Share our conversation, your questions for Roman and suggestions. Feel free to leave them in the comments. And don't forget to hit the bell so you get daily notifications about the military update. Roman, it's reported that GBU-39s were used. We see 4 missiles struck the positions of the occupiers' artillery units. A good maneuver. Our pilots dropped the GBU-39 while flipping over on a climb. That's what it's called. First a climb, missile release, then a flip, descending to ultra-low altitudes and dropping below the radar horizon. It's a very beautiful maneuver, you can see it clearly now. Then the GBU-39s deploy their wings, turn and head toward the target using satellite data. In other words, they follow satellite guidance. Performing a combat mission, 90-kilo warhead, very accurate hit. It is a very savvy, good planning aerial bomb, which our aviators have now learned to work with on old Soviet equipment, sort of like the MiG-29, but nevertheless perform this task very well. 5 bombs are lifted into the air and dropped. The only thing is the danger is significant. Sometimes at the top of the climb, right at the start of the flip, several Russian air defense missiles are already flying toward our pilot, but nevertheless he manages to escape, slipping into radar invisibility below the radar horizon, and the missiles self-destruct. Nevertheless, a very dangerous maneuver, but the flight crew is ready to perform it. Roman, let's talk about what they say in the United States. It is clear that there are serious intentions to push against Russia. We'll come back to that, but Associated Press and Reuters, major and reputable agencies, reported last night that Ukraine has had important ammunition supplies restored. It's about 155mm caliber and about shells to GMLRs, I assume, to HIMARS. That's missiles. The HIMARS projectile is M30, M31. The Americans stopped it first, an old Soviet trick. First worsen the situation, then bring it back to the original state and come out ahead. Here's the same thing. Trump definitely did well in Russia once under the Soviet Union, because he picked up a lot of things from that. From the use of newspapers to such mechanisms of participation of one's own, at least. At least thanks for that, we need the 155mm shell. Although Europe will definitely supply to us up to 2 million a year. Czech initiative, thanks to Petr Pavel and the Czech people. And to all participants, because half of Europe is financially involved in this initiative, that's a minimum. But nobody will supply us with missiles for HIMARS, GMLRs, M30, M31, except the Americans. That is, it is very important to have a sufficient number of these kinds of missiles, because we have several dozen systems, HIMARS, which work very well. By the way, the same warhead as in GBU-39, 90 kilos, sometimes you can even confuse whether the M31 missile or GBU-39 works. From afar, it looks about the same. Roman, by the way, France, and we know that once they declared that they would provide Ukraine with Scalp missiles. These are Franco-British cruise missiles called Scalp in France. In Britain, Storm Shadow. Thus, their Minister of Defense Sébastien Lecornu said that for the first time in 15 years, they will start and renew the production of Scalp missiles. They gave them to Ukraine from warehouses. How good is this new technology? How well Scalp is working on the front against the Russians? It's a bit simpler than Taurus, but fulfills its purpose. At one time, decades ago, the task of building this missile was set. British-French design. The Brits manufacture it. It's actually called Storm Shadow. And the French produce their own parts, their own factories, and now they, 15 years have passed, are restarting production, hoping that the hundreds of billions of dollars that Europe will allocate to increase its defense capabilities will go to British enterprises for the purchase of these scalps. This is not only for us, it is first of all for restoring the number of these missiles sent to us, and of course for increasing the stockpile in France itself. This is a definite plus for us economically, which means that business is also involved here. If it didn't make sense, no one would run it. So it makes sense. Hundreds of billions of euros will be spent on arms purchases over the next dozen years, and the Scalp missile has proven itself very well. The Scalp missile will be in demand on the arms market for the next few decades, for one simple reason only. It worked against the Russian army and fulfilled combat missions almost 100% of the time. Now that's a savvy marketing move, I'd say. And the French are right to launch. Europeans need to launch fully, so that not a single euro goes to a third party. All the euros that will be allocated for security, it is better to leave them to Europe. Roman, this will push first of all the economy, and secondly, it will increase independence from other states, including showing how our defenders are destroying the Zemledeli system.
Спільнота Стерненка, яка активно допомагає нашим бійцям на фронті, продемонстрували кадри на фронті, як наші оборонці ліквідовують.
Now I'll show you. In general, what kind of system is this? How serious is it? How dangerous is it in the hands of the occupants? Remote mining system like MLRS, anti-personnel mines are mostly thrown at 15 kilometers. In principle, for defensive tasks or for offensive tasks, let's say, the creation of a firebag is quite a successful system. It was the one the Russians used heavily in 2023 to create and strengthen Surovikin's line, if anyone remembers. That is, it has proved itself well on the basis of MLRS. We also need to develop this kind of system. It's a very smart, strategic move on one hand. Naturally, as soon as this system comes into sight, it must be destroyed immediately. It's better to destroy it before it sets mines. Oleksandr Syrsky, commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian security forces, said that in November every third target on the front line, regardless of whether it was a live target, armored vehicles or artillery units, was eliminated by unmanned systems. How hard is it now to overestimate the importance of the Magyar drone systems, who has unified all drone operations in Ukraine? And how key and important is it in this war? Can it be parallel to artillery, aviation, and other areas? Each means of defeat has its own task. And at this stage, there are not yet enough air forces, and air superiority has not yet been conquered. At the moment, you could say it is the power of unmanned systems that is taking a third of the destruction. There will be aviation in sufficient numbers. Once we can overwhelm Russian air defenses and operate on the front lines, coming out with bombers directly dropping free-falling aerial bombs, it is clear that both artillery and unmanned systems forces will fade into the background. But when will it be? So it's a whole process of gaining superiority. It's quite a serious preparation. We need a sufficient number of airplanes. We need, let's say, one more brigade, at least a couple of brigades to work with the new equipment in one direction. To cover the 2,000-kilometer front, about 200 airplanes are needed. That is 5 times what we have now, that's at least. Because while aviation on the wing in full force, of course, the forces of unmanned systems are taking over quite a bit. And a big thanks to them for that. Per day, 600 to 800 targets they destroy, worth a milestone of 1,000 targets to destroy. And if there are enough drones, enough means of defeat, then, in principle, this bar will be crossed by Magyar. So he will achieve it. He has a very good now launched such an interesting flash mob. That is, they are already working directly on each goal. It is very correct. On each, practically on each head. And the right approach, when it is for the destruction of even one Russian soldier on the line of contact, that the people who carry out this task are rewarded. It was Madhyar who pushed this topic and it is yielding results. So now there will be every Russian head deep in the combat radius of the means of defeat that Madhyar will have. The main thing is that he should have them. Direct supplies are made by the Ministry of Defense, our indifferent persons among others. Madhyar is producing, they are trying to saturate the front. But the front is growing, the needs of the front are great, so if you have the opportunity, help Madhyar in any way you can, from financially, to the drones themselves, to innovative systems, logistics mechanisms, that is, everything you can, because it is precisely the forces of unmanned systems that will take over. Until the Air Force is fully operational, they can take over. More than half of them can take over at this stage. They can take over the tasks at the line of contact with the creation of the kill zone that Madhyar was talking about. If he said it, he did it. Roman, the economist analysts have analyzed the military aid from the United States. There are two programs. PDA, this is American, from the president, which under Biden was issued from the warehouses, and also USAI, contracts with US factories. And what's interesting, they showed the graph and it shows the following. The bright red-orange color marks the PDA, while the less bright color represents the USAI. And USAI is calculated until 2028. This analysis makes it clear that the program, which was approved under Biden, is designed for several years, not literally as they said in 2025, everything will end. The main finances which are for our needs are designed to end in 2025. Why does the PDA end in 2025? USAI is procurement from manufacturers. So it's a certain payment to the manufacturers, let's say, for production. These are mostly missiles, that is, missiles to HIMARS, control systems, let's say missiles to missile systems. It is stretched, that is, they could not produce it at one time, nor could they give it to us from the warehouses. Because the right thing was basically calculated, but again it's a thin layer of what we need. It is a small nomenclature and it is not necessary to count on it much. Although nevertheless, there until 2028, some items we will receive directly from manufacturers at once, bypassing the warehouses of the US Army. So it is a direct program, and there is hope for it, but once again, it is not a cardinal solution to the issue. We have to launch, and we have high costs, we need a lot of consumables, and we have to launch our own programs to maximize the production and use of means of defeat, from FPV drones to ballistic missiles. Roman, and what was said in the US. Trump said he's ready to consider transferring a Patriot system to Ukraine, although it's expensive, but no one expects anything for free from this administration. Senators said that by the end of the working period, by August 1st, they are ready to vote on the sanctions bill against Russia. I realize that I ask you very often about Congress, about sanctions. What is your perception? How much do you think this bill is worth and how necessary is it? Do you really believe that this administration, this Congress, can somehow pressure Putin? This administration can't. If they had started with pressure, if there would have been Pompeo with Bolton, we've talked about this. The problem is the administration. The entourage makes the king. Administration went to solve Middle Eastern issues, at the expense of Ukraine, at the expense of European issues, and nothing will change without a change of administration. They will stomp around, generate some ideas, but the output will be zero. So it's like a stubborn standstill. And that's about as far as it's going to go as long as this administration is running the processes. It's not Trump who rules after all. Once again, the entourage makes the king, and then the king blesses the action. Therefore, until there is no change of course in the administration, there will be no change of course in relations with Russia. Let's wait. The situation now is such that Trump will have to change administrations. There are too many problems. It's a hodgepodge that Trump brought in, or that Trump himself brought in, after his inauguration into the administration. It has caused too many problems. To Trump himself, America itself, and all of America's allies. So let's wait for decisions to be made. Only after that we can talk about the reality of actions as such, and not just a change of rhetoric that we are hearing now. And it doesn't take much for us to impose sanctions. We should simply arrest those who banned the Malyuk-Budanov sanctions, arrest them specifically, indicatively, find the generator of the ideas, the beneficiaries, so to speak, of the ban on the destruction of Russian hydrocarbons, and continue to destroy them. We have this opportunity. Roman, it's hard to call you someone who praises the government or even the Verkhovna Rada, but here's some news. The Verkhovna Rada Committee has approved a draft law that says that men will have to serve in the army in order to enter the civil service. Rarely, but if there's something to praise, why not praise it? Really smart decision. We've been talking about it for a long time. We need to move the civil service into the post-service mode after the armed forces of Ukraine. And here's this first move so far, but it's in the right direction. That is, only persons who have served in the armed forces of Ukraine, optimally under contract, can apply for civil service. There are 1-year contracts, 3-year contracts, 5-year contracts, depending on the opportunity. In general, the most optimal option, I have already told you how this system should be adjusted. From about 15 years old from school, we should teach our children to shoot, to work with a gun. No automatic rifles, no grenade launchers, all these ideas of some great on participation directly in the army. No, we just need to start teaching defense, defending ourselves with the means of defeat, the gun. It is possible to make a shooting range in every school. By the way, smart teachers or shooting instructors, they will immediately select young people who are ready, in principle, by genetics. By the way, it doesn't matter. Gender equality should be unambiguous here, because sometimes girls are much better and cooler with weapons, especially in close combat, than males. Especially snipers. Perseverance and certain points related to genetic ability to work with sights and with optics, including this type of weapon. So you have to start at 15. That is the last 2 years to teach 2 things. To shoot a gun, defending yourself, and the second thing is to drive a car. That's what all children should be educated on this issue. Instructors will select, offer, at least further to people who are sustainable through their genetics to handle guns. There are so many issues here that psychologists and military instructors should consider. And then suggest that these people apply to military schools. Right after school, at 17 I entered flight school, Chernihiv Higher Military Aviation School. At 18 I was already flying the L-39. I stayed there as an instructor. In this mode you have to run these processes. After military school, 4 years of school, variously ranging from some aviation topics to, let's say, land. It doesn't matter who has what kind of pull. You can't do it before you're 21. At 21, a person gets lieutenant's epaulets, has gone through 4 years of military training, plus some civilian training too, depending on the opportunity, who is drawn where, from government to engineering. Virtually all military, they are engineers, ready pilots, flight engineer, that is given engineering training. Because from the age of 21, this is a ready young man. No matter if it's a lady or a guy, he is ready to fulfill combat missions. And from 21 to 49 you can serve, depending on the opportunity, depending on the set of positions, conclude 3 to 5 year contracts. Once some type of contract ends, only then can one qualify for civil service. In such a regime, we will get hundreds of thousands of young men of both sexes who have passed through the armed forces of Ukraine, ready to defend this state. This is a state that no one would risk attacking. They will not risk attacking a state ruled by officers of the Ukrainian armed forces. It just won't work. No one will have such a thought in his head, realizing that immediately the entire state structure will turn around and, first of all, punish the aggressor. Especially the entire state structure will be mostly after the armed forces of Ukraine. They will be keenly aware of the needs of the army. We will not have an army naked and barefoot to meet the enemy, because the state structure simply did not provide airplanes, missiles, and so on and so forth. They will be the first to look at it because they will be the first to go to the front lines. Therefore, we should definitely not only praise this law, we should support it. And it should be in its purest form, without any reservations, that is, without any squirming, specifically to accept persons of both sexes in the civil service only after service in the armed forces of Ukraine. That's it. End of story. In this position, it will be a very good law, which will eventually clean up our civil service of useless, unnecessary people who do not understand what the civil service is created for. European partners have been dragging their feet on the 18th sanctions package. By the way, Estonia, the country that understands Ukraine the most, that helps the most. Their foreign minister Tsakna says he will block the 18th package if it doesn't include a reduction of the price cap on Russian oil. But I would like to mention France and Germany. Friedrich Merz said that diplomacy with Russia is over. There is nothing to talk about with her. I guess he used to say earlier after Orban flew to Moscow in the summer of 2024, after they hit Okhmatyt. And France's defense minister Le Cornu says that the demilitarization of Ukraine, as Russia calls it, is an absolute red line that no one even wants to discuss. Much is said, good messages, the rhetoric is good. Let's drop the price of oil to $30 a barrel for Russian oil. A counter-proposal, as in a toast. Let's destroy the Russian hydrocarbon industry. What's the point of lowering the price of Russian oil if you can just destroy it? And Russia won't even get $30, because what is $30? That's serious money. They'll be the ones getting over $100 billion a year for with a figure like that. Now getting over $300 billion will be getting $150 billion. That's money too, and we need to make sure that they don't even get $1. It can be done. Once again, we need to arrest the generators of Russian hydrocarbon security. Arrest those who ordered Malyok, Budanov, and Syrskyi not to hit the oil refineries. They should be arrested and convicted under Article 111. Under Part 3, with full confiscation and life imprisonment. Because hundreds of thousands of people have died, because of idea generators like this. And let's ensure the security of the Russian Empire, so that it can easily buy equipment, ammunition, and so on and so forth. So it is all with great respect to our Estonian brothers. They help us a lot, but these are half measures. Half measures don't work in war. And in combat, if you start working with half measures, you are killed immediately, because the enemy must be destroyed, or he will destroy you. There are no other options. That's why Merz, again the change in rhetoric, is not working out diplomatically. 300,000 have been killed. What diplomatic route? What is he even talking about now? We need to act. Merz basically already has consistent actions in place. So in that sense, there's no need to criticize him harshly. And realistically, he's already starting to unfold what Merkel-Scholz said before him. But he's deploying this ship to do actual combat. We can expect this from Merz, after him Rheinmetall, after Rheinmetall BlackRock. These are serious structures, $10 trillion of investments, so basically he cannot be afraid in this sense. And Germany is a serious country. So we have to act, we have to stop talking after all. We've had enough talking. The 12th year, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are dying. Today Kiev again took the Russian attack on itself. How do we cover our Ukraine from attack? Attack Moscow. What can we attack Moscow with? Ballistics. Can't produce it yourselves, just buy it. Ask the Ukrainians to buy from the Iranians. But Iran won't just sell, they think we have Israeli power. Request certain Ukrainian funds. They'll buy Fateh and Zulfikar from Iran, and they'll reach Moscow. And this will be a serious shield for Ukraine. And talking, how much talking can we do? The Russians themselves, if we talk about the front line, are complaining, so to speak, about the Sumy direction. The situation mirrors Ukraine's Sudzha withdrawal. What do they have in mind? From the western flank between Kostiantynivka and Kindrativka in this direction. Let's paint it blue. Serious attacks by the defense forces. They are breaking into their positions and say we should expect good news from this direction soon. The Russians came in on the shoulders of our retreating army from the Kursk direction, came into our territory. It was not an operational and tactical breakthrough, it was not some serious operation, the tales told by our crazy deputies. So it's just an improperly executed withdrawal from Kursk. That is the raid operation, which was supposed to end in January, oversat. On the shoulders of our retreating army, the Russians slid into Sumy territory. They had no such task, specifically operational and tactical. They can't dig in, they are still in offensive positions. That is, we are working to destroy the rear. We constantly hear blows. Why on the Kursk direction? Logov, Rylsk, Glushkovo, Koronevo, Tyotkino. These are all rear areas of this Russian group that has now dropped in on us. Once again, the specific fault of Syrsky, he did not insist on the exit when you and I talked back in January. He didn't insist on withdrawal, on turning to a defensive position, oversat. And now we are trying to solve these problems. We will definitely solve them, because the Russians do not have and cannot have a strategic initiative in the Sumy direction. For various reasons, one of which is that the Russians do not have enough forces to fulfill the main tasks on the Eastern Front. Roman, thank you very much for this update. Dear viewers, subscribe to YouTube 24 and to my YouTube channel. Like, comment, share your feedback and suggestions. We always welcome feedback, and be sure to hit the bell so you get daily notifications about the latest military update with Roman Svitan. I am Igor Havryshchak. See you.